Greetings and a warm welcome to the lesson. The subject is auditing. Today we are going to define two things, that is internal controls and internal control system. The topic is risks, errors, and frauds in an organization. Today's focus is on internal controls. So what are internal controls? Internal controls are specific policies, procedures, tasks, activities, rules, and automated tools that are designed and implemented by an entity's management to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of the entity's objectives. For the objectives of an organization to be met, internal controls have to be implemented. Internal controls have to be, first of all, designed, then implemented. And internal controls are rules, procedures, tasks, activities, and automated tools that the management has to implement and design so that the objectives of an entity may be met. So that candidates, we may have controls over the sales system. When selling, there has to be controls. When purchasing, then there are also controls that are required. Controls may be required when dealing with the entity's non-current assets like motor vehicles, like buildings, land, equipment, computers. When you have such assets, then you have to have in place controls. Controls may also be required when dealing with cash. So controls are the specific procedures, rules, and also tasks that are designed and implemented within an entity by management to ensure that the objectives of the entity are achieved. And these objectives fall into three broad categories. One is related to effectiveness and efficiency of operations. Internal controls. Candidates, we are dealing here now with the objectives. Objectives fall into three categories. Categories of objectives. One, we have effectiveness, number one, and efficiency of operations. Effectiveness and efficiency of operations is the first category of objectives. This relates to how well the entity uses its resources to achieve its goals, including performance, including financial targets, and also safeguarding assets against loss. Number two is reliability. Reliability of financial reporting. This focuses on ensuring that financial statements and other financial information are accurate, complete, and reliable. You understand? Then, of course, three, we have compliance with applicable laws and regulations. Compliance with applicable laws and regulations. This ensures the entity adheres to all relevant legal and regulatory requirements, because we know organizations operate in a legal environment where rules, laws, regulations have to be obeyed, and therefore compliance with applicable laws and regulations is also another category of objectives. So Internal controls are specific policies, procedures, tasks. These are activities that are designed and instituted to ensure that the goals of an organization are met. Now, examples of internal controls would include, these are categories. Examples include segregation of duties, authorization and approval. We have segregation duties. Now, segregation of duties ensures that no single person has control over all the aspects of a transaction. No single person should have the authority over all the steps involved in a transaction. For example, if it is sales, if you are selling on credit, the one who is approving orders should not be the one making the deliveries and should not be the one to receive payment. There has to be segregation of duties in that regard. The person who authorizes a payment should not be the same person who processes it and also records it. There has to be segregation of duties. Authorization and approval. Authorization and approval. This requires specific levels of management to approve transactions beyond a certain threshold. For transactions to be executed, there has to be authorization and approval. And there ought to be levels of management to approve transactions beyond a certain limit or threshold. Examples, number 3, reconciliations. From the word reconcile, reconciliations. This means comparing records from different sources to ensure accuracy. We may have reconciliation of bank accounts. We may have reconciliations of stocks, reconciliations of trade receivables. This has to happen. Reconciliation of accounts payables and all that. Reconciliations is also another example of internal controls. For physical controls, this means safeguarding assets through measures like locks, safes, security cameras, restricted access, etc. If you have assets, physical assets, you can safeguard them physically by limiting access to such assets and so on. Physical controls are examples of internal controls. Then number 5, there is what we call information systems processing controls. Information processing controls. Information processing controls. These are controls with within the IT systems to ensure the accuracy, completeness, and authorization of data. For example, having password policies, data backups, edit checks, and so on. Information processing controls. So that's the meaning of internal controls. We've given examples of internal controls. Then let's move on to internal control system. What is an internal control system? Internal system. Internal control system is the overall framework or structure of policies and procedures effected by an entity's management designed to provide reasonable assurance about the achievement of an entity's objectives. So it is a comprehensive strategy that encompasses all the individual internal controls within an organization. So internal control systems or an internal control system is the overall framework. It is the overall framework. An internal control system is the overall framework or structure, the overall structure of internal controls or structure of policies and procedures. Structure of policies and procedures, rules, activities designed to help an organization achieve its objectives. It is the overall framework. You need to include here framework. It is the overall framework or structure of policies and procedures effected by the management designed to provide reasonable assurance about the entity's achievement of goals, about the achievement of the entity's objectives. It is a comprehensive strategy that encompasses all the individual internal controls. When you put together all these individual controls, segregation of duties, authorization and approval, reconciliations, physical controls, information system processing controls, all manner of controls, all of them, they comprise now the internal control system, because a system is a group of components. So the organization may have all these components together under the internal control system. So while individual internal controls are the building blocks, the internal control system refers to how these controls are integrated, managed, and monitored across the entire organization. It's not just a collection of rules, but a dynamic process that operates continuously to support the entity's mission and strategic goals. So a widely categorized, I don't know if you're understanding what I'm saying, candidates. It refers to how the individual controls are integrated. These are individual controls. So it is the internal control system now that integrates the whole of these individual controls into a whole, where these internal controls are then, these activities are then managed and monitored across the entire organization. And there are 5 interrelated components that constitute an effective internal control system. An internal control system has the following components. For an internal control system to be effective, it must have these 5 components. One is control environment. Control environment, which is set by management. It is the tone at the top. The tone at the top. This sets the tone of an organization. Control environment sets the tone of an organization, influencing the control consciousness of its people. It includes the integrity and ethical values of management, the commitment to competence, board of directors oversight, management's philosophy and also operating style. It refers to the organizational structure, the assignment of authority and responsibility, and the human resource policies and practices. That environment is what we are referring to as control environment. The first component is control environment, which sets the tone of an organization at the top. It is influenced by the control consciousness of the people. That's the first component. The second component is risk assessment. Risk assessment is a second component of internal control system, and it involves the entity's identification and analysis of relevant risks to the achievement of its objectives. So risk assessment refers to the entity's identification and also analysis of relevant risks to the achievement of its objectives, which then forms the basis of determining how the risks should be managed. Then 3, we have control activities as the third element. Control activities. These are the policies and procedures that help ensure management directives are carried out to address risks, and they occur throughout the organization at all levels and in all functions. We've been mentioning some of them. Segregation of duties, authorization and approval, reconciliations, physical controls, internal checks. We can go on and on. These are control activities, the rules, the procedures that are put in place to ensure that the organization manages the risks. Then we have information and communication. Information and communication is the 4th component of internal control system. This involves identifying, capturing, and communicating pertinent information in a form and time frame that enable people to carry out their responsibilities. And effective communication flows down, it flows across, it flows upwards, and also it flows externally. Last but not least is monitoring activities. Monitoring activities. Now, monitoring activities is a process that assesses the quality of the internal control system's performance over time. It includes ongoing monitoring activities. It includes separate evaluations or combination of both. So do you understand, candidates? That is the internal control system. And in closing, I want you to appreciate that internal controls, because we have been studying 2 things in this lesson. We've studied internal controls and internal control system. It's important to know and remember that internal controls are specific actions and mechanisms, like the physical controls. These are specific. Segregating of duties, these are specific things. Reconciliations, these are specific things and mechanisms. Internal controls are actions. These are specific actions and mechanisms. While an internal control system is the overarching framework that organizes, integrates, and also manages these controls in order to help achieve its objectives, in order to help achieve the organization's objectives. And that's all for our today's lesson, where we've distinguished these 2 things, internal controls and internal control system. Bye-bye.